The National Integrated and Identity System, which we are launching today, kicks off a national process of biometric registration of all Kenyan citizens and foreign nationals residing in the country. It builds on the Integrated Population Registration System, commonly referred to as IPRS, which has provided a platform to link civil data maintained under different frameworks, but has proved inadequate to meet the needs of a growing economy, including e-commerce, and an increasingly sophisticated citizenry who seek a broad and complex package of services from their government.
Fuata sisi kama Wakenya. Nimejua wengine walikuwa hawajaelewa vizuri. Kwa sababu wengine wamekimbia mahakamani. Ati wanapinga. Mimi nauliza wanapinga nini? Dada mahakama anasema ati hiyo ni lazima, sijui nini. Ikiwa kama kungekuwa kitu ambacho inatakana hiyo ni lazima ni hii. Lakini hata wale mahakama wetu bado hawajaelewa. Wao vile vile bei maneno bado hawajajua vizuri. Kama mimi ningekuwa jaji huko ningesema hii kitu mpaka hivi ni lazima.
Kama kungekuwa na kitu ya lazima ingekuwa ni hii. Haya basi. Tonight, President Uhuru Kenyatta is calling on all Kenyans to register with the National Integrated Identity Management System, otherwise known as NIMS, and acquire a Huduma Namba. While launching countrywide registration in Machakos County, Uhuru noted how digital listing of police officers weeded out nearly 5,000 ghost workers, saving the country some 148 million shillings in monthly wages. ODM party leader Raila Odinga criticized those opposing the Huduma Namba, saying Kenya has gone digital and he wished the registration was mandatory. But even with the rollout, questions still linger about the government's priorities, cost implications, and data safety. Could this be Kenya's magical number? And trust me, this is a topic that elicited lots of reaction from the minute it was made clear that this is a number that every single Kenyan needs to have. And for those of you who've been following this story, you do know that the three-judge bench okayed the go-ahead of that launch, but then barred the state from collecting citizens' DNA, forceful listing, and locking out the unregistered individuals or Kenyans from government services. So that is the big story we are talking about this evening. But before we get into it, let me bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna. Sophia, talk to me.
Good evening, Linda. So today, President Uhuru Kenyatta officially launched the National Integrated Identity Management System, NIMS, or better known as the Huduma Namba. It's a registration of all Kenyans and foreigners residing in Kenya. The pilot will continue for 45 days, and this comes a day after the High Court, on one hand, whilst allowing the exercise to go on, ruled that the government cannot collect DNA samples from Kenyans. It cannot deny government services for those who do not have this number. It cannot compel Kenyans to register fresh, registration in this Huduma Number registration exercise, and also that there will not be a timeline of when this exercise stops. Of course, this is pending the full hearing and canvassing of this case before the High Court. Let me now speak with the Senator, Nairobi County, is Johnson Sakaja. Thank you for making time for us. Let's begin with the question, how many sources of truth, single source of truth, will Kenyans have, or one-stop shopping as far as all the data around Kenyans? Because what the president said today in Machakos as he launched this exercise is that NIMS, this Huduma Namba, will be building on the IPRS, the Integrated Population Registration System, which as well was touted in 2015 when it was launched, single source of truth, one-stop shop, the same thing we're hearing now. So isn't this repetitive? Why not integrate what we have already?
Thank you. Thank you, Sophia. As you well know, this is a matter that has been before my committee in the Senate, and it's a matter that we started an inquiry on because of such concerns from the public. The first meeting didn't take off. We realized there had been some miscommunication between us and the government, and we invited them again last week, where we were able to discuss it at length. Of course, some matters would have been sub judice because the court ruling was not out.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think sections of the media were not allowed, actually the whole media was not allowed to cover it. And I think the media should have been allowed to cover it because a lot of the things which needed clarity were actually clarified by government, including that question you've just asked, how many sources of truth, single sources of truth, single means one. If you look at the previous system, it was not digital. And the explanation that government gave was that, we need now to have a digital system that incorporates the biometrics, of individuals, whether it is a thumbprint, etc. The ones you've had before, even with the DCI, when you do good conduct, are all manual. You go and you put for ink, etc., and it's placed there. Right. So at least that concern was covered. That even you had the IPRS, but now we need a digital form of the IPRS. Right. So that tomorrow, whether it is a child, etc., the same number they have all through their life, applies everywhere. Right. We also asked, why would you want to collect DNA from Kenyans? And they clarified that they did not even intend to collect DNA. There had been a misunderstanding because when the law was passed, in as much as we had issue with the kind of law that was passed through a miscellaneous amendment, it spoke about allowing government to collect that DNA, etc. But they said they do not intend to. In fact, they don't even have the facilities or equipment. You cannot collect DNA using a BVR machine. Biometric, reader machine. Yeah. That is not the machine through which to collect DNA. So most of those concerns were addressed. Yeah.
But allow me to pick up on that, on the DNA, because they have been saying that we do not intend to collect, we do not have capacity, but the law allows. So if tomorrow they manage to get all of this equipment, they can, because the law allows them to. So why not reverse the law? Because the other thing, it was passed under statute miscellaneous. My understanding is usually such legislation are those without far-reaching implications. Ideally. This was lumped up with all of those, and some people read this was mischievous of Parliament to do in the first place. But speak to me on why they not work to reverse that law, because it is there. It allows them to do as and when they choose to. In that meeting, we had the Attorney General, we had the CS and the PS and the entire team. Right. And we agreed that they must relook some of those provisions of the law, including a substantive data protection law, because we need to be sure that the data of Kenyans that is being stored is protected. It can be used for all manner of purposes, even if it's a successive government, even if it's not necessarily this government. The data protection law must be comprehensive and be able to protect those aspects. And we agreed that we shall look into those provisions, and to even look at the substantive law. Miscellaneous amendments are not the ones to do such things, if anything. But you understand how government is like electricity. You always try to use the shortest route with the least resistance, and that is what they used. But we've agreed that must be relooked at. They can go ahead with their pilot to make sure that, because we understand the need to have that kind of database for the people, even for just normal services that you would require as a Kenyan. Okay. It does make sense for us. There's a lot of money that has been lost through fake numbers out there. When the capitation was being done for schools, just because the headmaster said I have 3,000 students, and then you go down there, you find only 1,000. You need to be able to be sure. The transfer for money for older people, the reason why those who deserve, many of them are not getting, is because there are also many fake numbers that are coming, even through the administration. Okay. So there's a need for that system, but let it be done in a way that protects the rights of Kenyans to privacy. We are clear that you cannot collect DNA, and the government says they don't want to collect DNA, so we're saying, okay, let's also make the law say that you cannot collect that kind of information, because we don't see how it will help you. So let's talk about data protection a little bit more, because whilst they're giving an undertaking, they will protect it. But what's the rush? Why do we now feel the urgency as a government, as a country, to go ahead with registration when we don't have that in place yet? Because somebody was tweeting the other day and saying, if the president's account, the president of Kenya, can be suspended because of some people trying apparently to mess around with it, how much more our data? How many individuals, because of how big and major data is in this day and age, would be seeking to, interfere with what the government has been able to collect? So why has Parliament not to insist that, hey, we have managed this far, why not first put legislation in place? Because there have been attempts that haven't panned out, and then proceed. I think on that one we're on the same page with the, what you're saying, what the public is saying, and Parliament, that there would be no need to rush the full rollout of this thing without that law. And we got commitment. Both the chair of ICT, Honorable Gideon Moy, and the AG were actually tasked to bring that law
so that we finish processing it. There's a version of it Senate already started looking at, but we want to unify and have one data protection regime. The good thing is that, look, there is no international or outside company that is actually dealing with the software. All the software to do that has been done locally. That's what the ICT minister told us, and we are going to verify it as a house. So that you can't say that all of this is being hosted in China, or all your information is in India or in the cloud, and controlled by foreigners. Because we must protect. Some things are about patriotism. We must protect information of Kenyans, So on that one, we're completely on the same page. We want the substantive rollout to be done when we have full data protection legislation. We understand, yes, the only thing that has been sourced outside is the hardware devices, so the stylus, the pen, the machine to take your prints, etc.
Yeah.
But the software that runs all of it has been done in-house through within the ministry and through our local developers, which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing. But to compel Kenyans to have it, of course, the court has stopped this temporarily for the pilot. But initially, the government had said if you do not have a Huduma number, you will not access government services. That is outrightly.
That was a reckless statement.
Yeah.
Whoever said that was a reckless statement. We asked them when they came here. We put them to task. We told them, no, you can't tell Kenyans that if they don't have this, they cannot access any services. But they said, gradually, once we collect that. First of all, they said that statement, I think somebody inadvertently sent it out improperly. That's what they said.
Right.
We said you cannot tell Kenyans that if you don't have this thing, you cannot access services. But we want to become, internationally, if you're in the state, you have a social security number. The social security number opens up for you all these other, facets, whether it's your driving license, whether it is your, school registration, etc. And this Huduma number is really just like a social security number. That is what they are trying to do. So we agree with the knowledge of it, but we said, such a noble thing, why shroud it in secrecy? That's what we're asking. We said, when you try, say, okay, let the media stay out, or we have just gone straight without coming to parliament, we've only engaged the National Assembly, then you're making something that ideally would be very noble and quite, actually encouraged to do it. You're making it look suspicious.
Yeah.
So I told them, just communicate a bit better, involve leadership. Because today, if a citizen of Nakuru asks their senator, do we go register on this Huduma number? The senator says, I don't know about that. They won't go. And also the communication coming out of the chiefs and assistant chiefs. Some of them have been telling people, we're coming into your house at night to get this information. That is not the way to move people along with such an important project. Yeah.
We've had leaders from the north part of Kenya, the far-flung counties, talking about the pastoralist communities. Historically, that's, they are moving from one place to the other. How will this work? That they've not had clearly how they ensured they will enlist all of their residents. But also the question of if all Kenyans did not have ID numbers. So we now know all of a sudden, because we are doing this biometrically, we'll be able to capture all Kenyans, really?
I mean, that's something that the government needs to explain with respect to whether we'll capture everyone. That is, now we're asking about the success of this thing that is still being piloted. And that's the reason there's a pilot. But I think, with respect to what the leaders from Northern Kenya are saying, it takes nothing. And I've told the CS and all the CSs time and time again, it takes nothing for you to call these leaders from Northern Kenya or from, region by region. Sit with them, whether it is the governor, the senators, the MPs, work out a strategy of how we will capture your people, how we will get the information. Just do that, But, when government decides to work in silos, that, what this ministry is doing, another one doesn't know, they're hiding it from parliament, they're hiding it from, you will not achieve anything. Yeah. People have trusted us with leadership. I have, close to 1 million Nairobians trust that they gave me a mandate, and I have more than 2.3 million voters. So, and if I start saying, no, this thing is bad, I suspect it, the chances of success are not high, just simply because I have not been engaged and I don't know. So carry leaders along. It's simple, just a breakfast meeting, or call them to your office. Go down to Garissa, go to Mandera, look at the terrain. Agree, actually over here, we need to do a mobile registration center, and we'll communicate through your religious institutions, through your mosques, or whether it is through whichever ways they use, the leaders know how they get through their people. Yeah. So let us have more collaboration. Let's stop shrouding things in secrecy. I believe the Huduma number, has noble intentions, and I think we require it to actually finish a lot of fraud that is happening. You'll find a lot of money, maybe running into tens of billions, is being paid to fictitious people out there. Even the basis through which counties are getting money is based on numbers that you cannot verify. Yeah. So we need to be able to have that single source of truth that is digital, and it makes it even easier, such that by the time a child becomes 18, they automatically They have the ID. You don't have to be told, oh, go get your grandfather's birth certificate, or go back to your village, especially those who come from border towns. Go back, get your grandfather's, and your grandfather probably died years ago. You may not know. In Nairobi, have issues in Majengo, for instance, and certain areas where children, their fathers are not necessarily known because of the kind of activities their mothers have been involved in. Yeah? And I know you understand what I'm talking about. And so they never get registered. So what happens? You breed these people into radicalism. They're told, oh, these guys don't identify with you. They don't know you. Come. Us will recognize you, and they join Al-Shabaab and all of that. Yeah. Because somebody who's in his 30s without an ID still, without a birth certificate, because they never got it then, cannot access a job, cannot get education, cannot get help, So we're saying, let us change that through the proper utilization of this name system. And it is possible for us to actually, over time, it won't be done in 45 days, it won't be done in a month or two, but over time, gradually, move on to that system where everybody is recognized from the time they're age 6. You're able to be registered.
Finally, are you convinced the government has done enough awareness to create awareness with Kenyans to understand, as you're breaking it down for us today, what is in essence is expected, what the concerns were there, and how the government is going to go around to ensure that Kenyans, are satisfied that due process is being followed? To Mashinani, do Kenyans understand this? No,
they have done a terrible job at making Kenyans understand it. If you walk into Parliament now, you'll find maybe 90% of parliamentarians don't understand it. So if the MP doesn't know it, the senators don't know it. At least Senate, we had a session and people are like, oh, that's what you're talking about. It's that, okay, now we get it. And the reason why you're seeing people rushing to court is because of that failure to understand, So I think they need to do a better job. They need a better communication strategy, not just, let's buy advertisements on TV stations and put things on the paper. No, do homegrown communication that goes down to the lowest level, where people understand, how does this benefit me? Am I at threat if I give such information? And they need to change the strategy on that. Yeah.
Thank you very much,
You're
Senator.
welcome.
We
Anytime.
appreciate your time. Johnson Sakaja is the Nairobi Senator, speaking to us about just some of those concerns that have been raised on this exercise at National Integrated Identity Management System, NIMS, Huduma Namba. Today it was officially launched. One of the other concerns, and perhaps, Linda, you could discuss this with your guests, is how long it's also taking. It took around 15 to 20 minutes, and this was the president where his data was pre-prepared as they were going into the whole registration exercise. So that's quite a long time. 45 million Kenyans, and each is taking about 20 minutes. So we'll see how all of this plays out. But of course, will government keep its word on reversing and relooking that legislation that allows them to collect people's DNA? Because to say they will not collect is not enough. Linda.
Sophia, thank you. I remember when this whole idea of Huduma Namba came in, and Sophia actually spoke to Interior PS Karanja Kibicho, and she posed that particular question: why don't you expand these elements of this law so that it's not misused in future? We didn't get a clear answer, so let's hope that as the days go by, we'll actually get a clear answer on that, the way forward. All right, so let's have this conversation in studio. We're doing that with Demas Kiprono, who's a campaign manager at Amnesty International. Thank you so much for joining us on The Big Story this evening. We're also speaking to Hannington Mambo, cybersecurity expert. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on The Big Story this evening. I'd like to start from where the senator just left it with Sophia. And he says, Sophia asked him, do Kenyans even understand this? He said 90% of members of parliament do not even understand what this Huduma Namba is. They don't even know how it will work in the first place. So if you're a member of parliament, the person who's supposed to represent you in parliament does not even understand what this Huduma Namba is, how do you expect millions of Kenyans out there to understand what this is? Kiprono, let me begin with you on the level of awareness that is out there and why it's important for Kenyans to understand what this is, because lots of opposition is coming in because we have no idea what this is in the first place.
Public participation under the Constitution of Kenya is a requirement. So in fact, the admission by the Honorable Senator that even the members of Parliament do not know what this law entails, what it really means to their lives, is evidence that there was no public participation, and that, first of all, I think it just fails the constitutional test. Secondly, having a law that collects personal data, especially data that such as DNA and data such as GPRS coordinates of your house, has to come with certain safeguards. So think about this. We do not have a data protection law. We are being told that we have a bill, but even if the bill is passed today, we really do not have frameworks to safeguard data as we speak right now. So it is very problematic, and It's actually also very problematic that the political class seems to have suddenly come together and urged Kenyans to embrace this new system, yet a lot of questions have been raised, and the courts themselves have been satisfied that there are a lot of gaps in this measure that has been taken. As Amnesty International, we do not oppose a system that makes life easier for Kenyans, but we have to ask ourselves, why DNA? Why GPRS? And even with assurances by the government that they are not collecting right now, because they do not have equipment. So when they get equipment, what happens to us?
Right, Mambo, you're a cyber security expert, and today in the morning, I listened into some of the samples of Kenyans just being asked what they know about Huduma Namba, and there's a gentleman who said it is a number that now allows you to get loans when you come up with a group of friends, so clearly people have no idea what you're even talking about in the first place. What is it about this Huduma Namba that should have been made clear to Kenyans for them to go along with this suggestion?
Thank you, Linda. I think this is a fantastic idea for the government, and I'm saying that because it helps to unite the government services, as they've said, and it helps also, it makes it easier for citizens to access the government services. But that may not necessarily mirror the feelings and the interest of the citizens or people who are going to use these Huduma numbers. First, we still have the misunderstanding of what the Huduma number is, what it's going to be used for, and what the reasons surrounding it. And secondly, I think looking at it from the standpoint of security, because I think that's one thing that several people are talking about, and even going to be raised up in some of the court cases, I'm sure. I think we've created we've created a very lucrative target of ourselves to cyber hackers and people who would harvest data for malicious users. Because in this scenario, we are going to have a single source of truth, which can be accessed using a single number of persons. And we have also created multiple access points because, as has been explained, this will be accessed by various government agencies, and in some cases even private agencies which offer government services. So in those two aspects, I think we've created, we are setting ourselves up for a lot of headache that we'll have to contend with going forward in terms of security of data.
Mambo, you're a security expert, so probably you can explain to Kenyans. I know you said we are opening up an avenue for hackers, and this will probably have multiple access forms. But from a layman's perspective, explain to Kenyans why the issue of DNA and GPS is a potentially emotive issue when it comes to Huduma Namba, what this can be used for.
I think we probably look at it first from the point of how potent storing this data in a centralized system becomes for hackers and attack. I think, as I normally say, security starts from a padlock. And usually, it works well when only one person has a key to that padlock. In this case, you are going to have a padlock to the data of everyone living in Kenya, but we are going to have several people having keys to this padlock. So for example, this could be NSSF, for example, it could be NHIF, it could be the banks, it could be the passport registration. So all these people are going to form sites or locations where an attack or an entry can be made into this central storage. So that explains the point about the multiple attacks. And also now, when it comes to the issues like DNA, the biometrics, the GPS, these are usually confidential, and in many countries, these are treated with a lot of privacy and confidentiality. To have this in a central location where I could, if a leakage happened, for example, through the passport registration point, somebody will be able to have information of individuals all the way from their passport information to their national registration, the birth information, and the DNA and the medical information. That is creating a very risky scenario for citizens who are going to lose this to attackers or people who need this data for their own weird purposes. And it's going to be very difficult to control that. That also will make it very attractive. The moment you include things like DNA and you include things like exactly where are these people, where do they live, where are they normally found, and stuff like that, that can become very dangerous.
So if it leaks, if someone gets access to it, then they have your entire information, from your birth certificate to your passport, where do you live, what do you do, your bank account, everything is in it.
As I started, it's a fantastic system for the government, because it will be easy for the government now to find all this information in one place. It's possibly transferable between, for example, if you went to get a passport, they would be they would be able to easily access your birth information, birth registration information, probably see which kind of schools you went to in the country to ascertain that you actually are a Kenyan or you studied in Kenya. But then to the person who is looking for this data to do other things, for example, to theft of data and resell it, or doing other stuff like that, then it makes a very attractive source to harvest this data, because the central data will mean that you get an access from any point where this data could be accessed, and you have everything about this person.
Wow. Kiprono, what are your thoughts?
As in the fact that legislators themselves do not understand this means that there was a miscellaneous amendment act that was passed, and right now they're walking back. The system is walking back. Instead of having public participation in the beginning, the public is now being engaged after the law has been passed already. That is fundamentally wrong. Another aspect is that the right to privacy is a fundamental human right under the Constitution and under international human rights law. And the law, Article 24, speaks to how and when this right can be limited. When can a right to privacy be limited? And usually, it usually has to go through an oversight mechanism and safeguards. So that, for example, if I'm suspected of terror, the NIS has to get a warrant for them to plant something in my house or to surveil me. Now, this new system wants to even have my DNA. My DNA is my everything. It is my future, my past, my present. It is the diseases that I am susceptible to. It is what is good about me. And you can imagine what that data means to maybe an insurance company. It means so much, and they would go to all leaps and bounds to get it. Another thing is that such data can be used against marginalized groups. So we can say people in the northern frontier and actually people who are opposing government. You can imagine if you have been flagged by the government, it just takes them just going through the records and getting your GPRS coordinates, and there you have it.
Tell me, go again, how would you get people marginalized in this?
For example, the people in the northern frontier have not been able to get IDs even today. And without an ID, you cannot access services. You cannot move around. This is yet another new system that that will not really address their problems, because even the IPRS did not. It was supposed to be the magic number. It was supposed to be the magic system, but it did not. We still have problems of people being overvetted, being denied outrightly, yet they are Kenyan citizens. So this system should have gone slowly, should have been subjected to public participation. It should only come to Kenyans after we have an operational Data Protection Act that enables us to protect personal data.
I'm still struggling to just get the point of how it will get people marginalized. I mean, everyone has to get registered afresh. But let me take a break here on The Big Story. Thank you for staying with us. So we have Demas Kiprono, who's a campaign manager at Amnesty International, Hannington Mambo, cybersecurity expert. You're on The Big Story. Stay with us. We'll be back in a few minutes.